Good morning. So I've never really prescribed to the Trump playing 5D chess theory. You know, where everybody thinks Trump's just head and shoulders smarter than everybody in Washington, and he's playing on another level and doing all these things behind the scenes, and there's always going to be this huge fantastical outcome, and Trump outsmarted them all. I'm not calling Trump dumb. I think he's incredibly intelligent. He's just, you know, he's not a lawyer. He's not Washington, D.C. kind of smart. But I think he might be doing, or his legal team might be playing a little 5D chess here with these lawsuits in different states. So we're coming up on the safe harbor date where states need to name their electors. Now, the only date regarding the election that is in the Constitution of the United States is Inauguration Day. It's the 20th of January. So the safe harbor date and electoral college date, those are not set in stone by the Constitution. There are federal laws that say that the electors need to be named by December 8th, and the electoral college convenes on the 14th. But you know, that was just set by some judge back in the 60s. There's no saying a judge today can't rule that that's doesn't apply. So what I'm talking about with the 5D chess is in these certain states, specifically Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Arizona right now, if there's a dispute, if there's an active lawsuit and courts are recognizing it, or at least hearing it, the states don't have to abide by the safe harbor date, the 8th. So if there's an active dispute, it can push back the safe harbor date in these states. So, you know, all these lawsuits that are getting tossed out and refiled based on typos and not paying a filing fee and stuff like that, could it be that the Trump legal team is just kind of playing with the clock here, playing with the calendar to get these states the ballots and the election in dispute, so they don't have to meet that safe harbor date? So there could be a little 5D chess going on there, which I think is interesting for sure, but I never really prescribed to the Q 5D chess stuff. So in Pennsylvania, you know, Pennsylvania is going to be the key here. It is the Keystone State. So Justice Alito, I think it was very telling back during the election when he ordered that the mail-in ballots be sequestered. They be separated from the other ballots. He knew then that there was going to be a problem with those ballots. So there was Sean Parnell and Mike Kelly's lawsuit was set to be heard on the 9th, and Alito moved it up so that the state of Pennsylvania had to have in their response, instead of by the 9th, which would be after safe harbor date, to be heard, get their evidence in by the 8th, the morning of the 8th. So I think that's a good sign that the Supreme Court's taking that case seriously. And basically what that case is all the mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania are illegitimate. They're unconstitutional. The state constitution very clearly says that you cannot have no excuse or unsolicited mail-in balloting. And you know what the governor and secretary of state did, or what they needed to do, was amend the Constitution prior to making that an election law and sending out those ballots. Now, they tried to get an amendment to the Constitution, but they stopped halfway through. They, they basically threw a middle finger up to the state constitution and said, well, we're doing it anyway, regardless of what the Constitution of the state of Pennsylvania says. So there's a really strong case there in Pennsylvania with Parnell and Mike Kelly. And I think it's a very good sign for Trump that Alito moved the date up to the 8th. You know, and if we can get the Supreme Court to acknowledge the validity of Trump's or Mike Kelly and Parnell's case in Pennsylvania, that's going to set a precedent for the rest of these states. It's going to give them the motivation that they can do it too. And they need to. Even if the facts of their case or the basis for their case is different, it at least tells them, listen, something needs to be done here. The American people are demanding it. Speaking of which, Trump's Georgia rally was interesting. It was supposed to be a, basically a rally for Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue down there to encourage people in Georgia to go vote in that Senate runoff. So David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler were there, but collectively they only spoke for a minute and a half, and Trump was up there for, an hour and a half, maybe even longer. And as soon as David Perdue gets up there, the entire crowd starts chanting. I mean, at the top of their lungs. It was incredible. Support Trump or fight for Trump, I think they were yelling. David Perdue couldn't even talk. The crowd was so loud. And I think what we're seeing is, especially in Georgia, the governor and secretary of state, they just don't care what the people want. You have, I don't know how many people were at the rally, 30, 40,000, screaming at the top of their lungs for the Republicans in Georgia to act and to do something and not allow this steal to go through. And the Republican the leadership's there, Kemp and the Secretary of State, they're not listening. They're just throwing their middle finger up at the people. And that's really an indictment on what the government's doing across the country, not just regarding the election, but regarding everything. It's truly not a representative government anymore. They just do whatever they want, whatever's in their best interest, and in the Georgia case, whatever's going to save their ass, because they're dirty. So you got the big rally in Georgia, and I don't blame those people down in Georgia. We're going to have till January to see if that runoff is on the 5th of January, I think, and by then we're going to know who's going to be inaugurated as president, I think. And if this comes out and they're allowed to steal it, the presidential election, those people in Georgia will not go down and vote for Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. It's just not going to happen. I wouldn't either. I think it's ridiculous. So, Trump's been calling on Governor Kemp in Georgia to call a special session of the legislature down there. And Kemp's excuse for not doing it is, I can't do that on behalf of Trump. But you don't have to do it on behalf of Trump. You have to do it on behalf of the people of Georgia. That's what it's for. It's not for Trump. Yeah, that may be the eventual outcome, but it's what the people of Georgia are calling for. So, if you live in Georgia and they're not going to fight tooth and nail for Trump, don't go vote in that Senate race. I wouldn't either. Just give them the whole federal government, and we'll start our own thing in the South. It's just, they can't get away with stealing this election and expect the Republicans to show back up and vote for them. They're basically treating the Republican voting base like the Democrats cheat the Hispanics or the blacks or whatever voting bloc there is. They're just taking full advantage and thinking, well, they're going to show up and vote for us no matter what we do. So we have to hold them accountable, much like the Cubans in Florida held the Democrats accountable in this election, and they voted overwhelmingly Trump. So Ted Cruz says he's going to argue Sean Parnell and Mike Kelly's case in front of the Supreme Court, and that's good. Ted Cruz has got experience in front of the Supreme Court. He's been in front of them 9 or 10 times, and he's a brilliant constitutional lawyer. So I think we have the best of the best up there arguing our case in front of the Supreme Court whenever we get there. So we talked about Alito sequestering all those ballots when the election was going on, and I think that's a very good sign. I think it's a very good sign for what's going to come out of this Pennsylvania election. So, you know what else I've been noticing? BLM only seems to show up prior to elections. Isn't that interesting? Where have they been since the election? What do Black Lives only matter when a Democrat is running to beat a Republican politician? Is that the only time Black Lives matter? Is when a Republican is in office? So it's just very clear that they're a political tool. They're Democrat activists, and they don't care about Black lives. They care about Democrats. They're a terrorist domestic terrorist organization funded by Democrats and elite Hollywood types, and they're violent. Of course, Black Lives Matter as a statement, but the organization, they only show up when it's politically, matters for Democrats. So that should tell you everything you need to know right there. Sidney Powell, it's not looking too good with what she's got going on. It's incredible that she can find all this Dominion and Smartmatic ballot software. She can find all this evidence, and these courts just won't hear it. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to go into what the validity of her cases were, but there's videotape evidence of this stuff, and you have a lot of circumstantial evidence with the CEO of Smartmatic being tied to Hugo Chavez, and it's all there. It's just these courts are so corrupt, they're just not hearing their cases. So they were able to get, I believe, Ware County, Georgia, they were able to get a voting machine and run a forensic test on it, or test ballots. So they took 100 ballots. I believe they were 50-50. 50 for Trump, 50 for Biden. They run these ballots through the machine, and they tested it 2 or 3 times. And each time it came back that out of 100 ballots that we knew before they were entered into this machine, half were for Trump, half were for Biden. So the outcome should be 50-50. 50 for Trump, 50 for Biden. Well, after they run these, the tabulation on the machine says that Biden had, like 50, 55, and Trump had 45. So it's hard evidence that the machines are rigged to change votes from Trump and give them to Biden. How is that? That should throw the entire election out. It's rigged. It's a rigged election, and Trump is absolutely right. So how all this information can be out there and it's looking like Biden's going to be the next president is beyond me. We should have no faith in the federal government after this. Absolutely none. I would just stop all support given to the federal government. Don't pay your taxes. Don't recognize federal agents. Don't recognize federal anything. Move to a state that mirrors your values and is economically makes sense for you, and just build a wall around that state against the federal government. That's the only way to combat this. They're totally corrupt. How the Democrat base, who is supposed to be, for decades the ones fighting against the big establishment corporate corruption, how they cannot support Trump is beyond me. Trump is the ultimate anti-establishment, rage against the machine candidate. He's against the big, Wall Street doesn't support him. The Washington establishment doesn't support him. The media doesn't support him. Hollywood doesn't support him. All these entities, which are supposed to be, representative of the corrupt machine, they all support Biden. But the Democrat base doesn't like Trump. Why? Because the TV told you he was mean or something? It just blows me away. And now everybody's sitting around waiting for, advocating for a shutdown so they can get another check from the federal government. If you want a check from the federal government instead of going out and operating your business or being part of a thriving economy, you are the problem. if you want to sit home and get a check instead of going to work, you are the problem. And you are why this country is divided, and you are why the government gets away with all the shenanigans. Because you're overlooking all the corruption, all the crime, just so you could get a measly check from the government. So, if that's you and you're watching this, you need to really think about what you've got going on in your life. So, it's not over yet for Trump. We still got some things in play. If we can get these states, quote unquote, in dispute, you know, the safe harbor date is meaningless. They don't have to name electors. And it's good that we've gotten on the docket in front of the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania. Next up is Georgia and Arizona. Georgia is what we really need. I will never believe that Georgia went blue for a guy like Joe Biden. If you told me a guy like maybe Barack Obama or something, all right. But a guy like Biden, no way. In Georgia, in the South, where it's only one city there that I could see being liberal, which is Atlanta, no way. So we'll see what happens in the next few days. Keep an eye on this safe harbor date, which is today, I believe, the 8th. Ted Cruz in front of the Supreme Court. You know, BLM, when are they going to rear their ugly head again? If Trump starts getting some wins in the Supreme Court, is that when BLM is going to decide that Black Lives Matter again? It's unbelievable. So, pray for Trump. Let's get it done. Call your representatives, especially in Georgia. Call that Secretary of State and call Governor Kemp over and over and over, or email them and say, you need to support Trump. The whole Republican establishment should be out in the media raging to support Trump. They're going to lose their entire base. The MAGA Trump movement is way bigger than the Republican movement. They're going to lose all the MAGA movement. At least all the ones that I know, and I think you too. All right, we'll catch you next time.